Hello, this is Falterfire. I know that I said on my last video that this was probably just going to be me rambling about cards, but we had a discussion on the Discord about discard decks and in a discard decks, and I wanted to play a run of the in a discard deck because it's an interesting list that is pretty different from a lot of other strategies and uses a lot of cards that you won't see used in any deck that isn't a discard deck. Uh, so yeah, I wanted to show off that list. I also, real quick, let's go over the market. So I already bought everything in the market because all these seemed pretty okay. The most important thing to note here is that we will be starting with Shieldbot, which is an incredibly useful trinket, especially because the in a discard deck tends to have a bit of a rough early game. It has a lot of power that it gets once it has its engine running, but until it does, the first fights can be pretty rough, and so Shieldbot will hopefully save us from taking some damage at least. So in his passives, again, are we get a tool every turn. The Mighty, Tough, and Adept bonuses are 10% higher than they normally would be. So the tool every turn is going to be one of, there's a number of them. There's like a dozen or so different tools. Some of them only appear in certain conditions, and all of them do various useful things, but they disappear after being played. We're going to get to see 4 card choices instead of just 3, thanks to our level 7 passive. And thanks to our level 10 passive, if we end the turn with any tools in hand, they won't be discarded. Although because we are trying to discard a bunch of cards, it's quite likely that we won't end up with having that many tools in hand at end of turn, and we don't have any tool generation in our starting deck because we are all in on this discard strategy. So step 1 of building a common discard deck is you just search your starting discard deck. I said common, I meant the starting deck. So the first thing you do is you look up discard, and then you add all the cards that look relevant. So our mana cards here are Siphon Card, which is 3 mana and we discard 1, and Void Focus, which is gain 2 mana, and then it increases value by 1 when discarded. So these 2 cards here are actually a pretty good way of talking about the initial tension in the discard deck, which is that you have 2 kinds of cards. You have your discard outlets, your ways that you are going to discard, and you have your discard payoff, which is things that give you a benefit for discarding them. Void Focus specifically is is a middling payoff because it does get better when we discard it, but it is at the cost of not getting mana that turn. A better example of a discard payoff would be something like Malevolent Idol, where it's going to deal damage to a random enemy when it's discarded. If we don't discard it, it will get stronger for the rest of combat if it's in our hand at end of turn, but it, in our starting deck, is one of our main ways to get damage out, so we'll be discarding it a lot. The best discard payoffs are all in our card pool, and I'll go over them in a moment. But that's part of why this deck is pretty weak starting out, is that we have some good discard outlets, but we don't have much in the way of payoffs yet. So Void Bolt is 1 mana, discard 1. If you do, deal 8 damage to any enemy. And so this is an important difference between this and, say, Brittle Shield. You'll notice that this says discard 1 if you do, whereas Brittle Shield is gain 5 shield, discard 1, and Siphon Card is gain 3 mana, discard 1. What this means is, if we play Void Bolt as the last card in our hand, it won't do anything. We have to have a card to discard to Void Bolt in order to get the effect, which can make having multiple of them in hand kind of awkward. And as you watch me play the deck, one of the things you'll notice is that lining up which cards I want to discard in what order, because ending, if my last card played as a Siphon Card or a Brittle Shield, then we're good, but if my last card plays as a Void Bolt, we are sad. The other cards in the deck, we have 1 Void Visions, which is just draw 1, discard 1, and it gives us a fairly small bonus, but it is a bonus when it's discarded, which is that we get Wits 1, which means that if we discard this, we'll draw an extra card next turn. And the last card is we have 1 copy of Tweak, and Tweak is a card that I like a lot. It initially looks pretty bad because we are spending 4 mana to not directly do anything, but it turns out that because it upgrades things until the end of combat when we upgrade them, and because we choose what we upgrade, this can end up being an incredibly flexible way to do whatever we need in the moment. If we need more shield, we upgrade Brittle Shield. If we're near the beginning of combat, we might upgrade Void Focus so that it'll scale faster. We can upgrade Siphon Card if we want it to just be able to give us more mana. There are a lot of options, and Tweak is probably going to be the first thing I upgrade, because Tweak Plus upgrades other things, and it is the cost reduction is pretty important because we want to be able to play Tweak as often as possible to upgrade as much of our deck as possible. So our card pool. Once again, the step one is just kind of searching discard and then adding most of the cards. So Void Ritual, I'm not running. It's possible I should be. I don't like how weak it is initially. I don't like that it needs to be spun up a couple times. Like you have to discard a couple times before it gets rolling. But with that said, I have had good luck with Void Eruption, which is kind of in the same boat. But we'll get there. So starting with the epic cards, you have Benevolent Idol, which is all the idols are unplayable, and they always do something either when you they all do something when you discard them, and then they have a different effect that is for the other two if it's in your hand at end of turn, and for Benevolent Idol is that when you draw it, you get the effect. So Benevolent Idol is going to do some healing and some shield every time we draw it and every time we discard it, which means that it is 10 shield and heal 4 at a very low cost to us. Adventurer's Log is going to create tools when it's discarded, which is a very good payoff. Mana Eruption is just a mana card, just like having it. I think it is. In general, we don't have a ton of growth, so it's possible increasing mana is stronger. I just have found that increasing mana scales relatively slowly, and it's difficult for it to pay off more than Mana Eruption, even if growth isn't a primary part of your strategy. So Ancestral Memory is draw 3, discard 3. The net result is that after you play Ancestral Memory, you have the same number. You're down a card because you spent a card playing Ancestral Memory, but you get to draw, because you get to see so much of your deck and you get to see get so many discards. Tends to be very useful in this deck. Dispel Magic is just always good. Empower is just always good. Let's see, let me scroll through this list instead of going page by page. Aether Storm is always good. That's a card that I'm just put in every deck. I think Aether Storm is just so powerful that it is hard to ever justify not having it. Demonic Power I might trade out. I like the fact that it is in that same camp as Aether Storm, which is just a generically powerful card that I like having. But it's possible I would be better off having a card that more directly helps my strategy. It's just a question of then, if I made that choice, what would the card that I replace it with be? Which is a lot of the reason I'm still on Demonic Power, is that I don't know that there is a different card that I like more than I like Demonic Power. So Gather Equipment is incredibly powerful if you have strikes. That may actually be the swap here, because I think we do have enough strikes in our card pool, and there's enough strikes that we can potentially pick up along the way. And the fail case of 2 costs to draw 2 skills is not abysmal. We're not thrilled about it, but it could be a lot worse. It's not doing actual nothing for us. So our rare and common cards. So we have Frantic Scouring, which is when we discard it, we create tools. And we also have Treasure Map, which is a similar thing where when we discard it, we get a treasure. These, when you discard them, do a thing effects are very good for us. Searching discard again will pull up our other payoffs. So the other 2 major payoffs here are Void Spike, which is a spell that deals damage to the first enemy and is played for free when it's discarded. And Void Eruption, which we have to discard a couple times before we can afford to play it, but once we can, it is going to deal damage and apply curse, which is pretty good. And it starts at 12 costs, gets cheaper every time we discard it. Void Shield gives a shield whenever we discard it, which is, again, a handy thing to just have. It's a good way to get us some sustain, keep us alive. I don't like random discard anywhere near as much, because you've seen my runs. I like to do very draw all the cards, play all the cards type stuff, and discarding cards at random removes control, and I'm not a huge fan of that. Yes, if it's the last card in your hand, it is fine, but if it's not, then you are kind of sad. So, other cards in the pool. We have various mana cards. we have 1, 2, 3, 4 mana cards. I might add one more. Pact of Insight might end up in the list because I do think the fact that we can just discard the Shrivels makes it a reasonable inclusion. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in, and we'll see what we end up removing for it. Our other mana cards, we have Cultivate, which is going to give us growth, which is going to be helpful because our fights tend to run kind of long. We have Mind Seed, which gives us some growth. We have Predator's Focus and Runic Focus because those are ways to get 4 mana, and we do have Predator's Focus trip anytime we do damage with anything, and we have quite a few spells in our starting deck, so Runic Focus is pretty easy to trigger. We have Increasing Visions because drawing spells is good, especially because if we have one of those Void Spikes I mentioned, that's the spell that we play when we discard it, then if we have Increasing Visions, that can draw us the Void Bolt, which will let us discard a card, and then we also will draw the Void Spike, which we discard, and that's a nice interaction that gets us some serious value. Likewise, it can help us draw the Void Eruptions that get cheaper when they are discarded, and so just being able to play one card that gives us both often a discard outlet and a discard payoff is incredibly handy. Other cards that I'm considering. Brilliant Idea, I might move in. We don't have a ton of Wits generation, which is the main reason to not take Brilliant Idea. But if we ever find any way to get enough Wits, then the value of being able to upgrade 2 cards in our hand is quite high. So I'm going to go ahead and add that as well for the moment. So we have Spirit Helmet, which I think I don't like. This is the gain 6 shield, gain growth 2. I have found in other decks that it doesn't do as much for me as I would like. We have Void Bolt, which I don't think I want necessarily. I think this is I think in general our problem is finding ways to discard or finding things that we want to discard rather than finding more ways to let us discard. So I think that can go. Other cards. We have Power Surge, which just gets us powerful. This is a card that I just kind of find myself putting in a lot of decks because it does good work regardless of what we're doing. So it can stay here for that reason. Blessed Strike, getting Purity is very good. Cleansing Shield. So these two I put in basically every deck. Against Step 3, having access to Purity, having access to debuff removal are both very valuable. So I will take the first copy of both of these in basically any deck I am playing because I find that they will always give value. Fueled Beam, just another discard out. So this is an example of a card that I would rather have than a Void Spike most of the time. I can't target it specifically, but it does damage to 2 enemies instead of just 1. It is 2 mana instead of 1, but I think overall I am usually happy to have this instead of Void Spike. Or not Void Spike, instead of Void Bolt. We have Void Spike, which is the one I talked about. We're obviously keeping that. Contemplate here, you've seen this in a few of my other runs just as a way to discard or to draw into mana. But here we're running it actually because we care about the fact that it discards as well. We have Arcane Strike. This, I think I'm fine with keeping. We don't often have enough hits to make triggering that Arcane Rune incredibly likely, so it may actually, I think I'm probably actually going to cut Arcane Strike and Frost Strike because I don't think we have enough ways to trigger them. Going back to where Arcane Strike was. And instead I'm going to slot in, I think, Surprise Attack because Ambush and Vulnerable to all enemies is always valuable. We have Invigorate as a way to get healing. So yeah, the other cards are still in the deck. We have the ability to pick up more tweaks because I think occasionally once you get to the point where you have like 25, 30 cards in your deck late in a run, you often will want a second copy of Tweak. Invigorate because having a way to get healing is pretty nice, and I still think Invigorate is one of the best low investment ways to get a small amount of healing in your deck. So other cards I'm considering. I think I'm going to add Arcane Nova. It has even though we don't have a lot of other Arcane synergy, Arcane Nova is a card that puts in a lot of work against a lot of fights, especially in depth to it is a card that does a lot of work against Drakes, and Drakes is a fight that this deck can sometimes struggle with, and it's not bad against most other fights. I don't think there's any times where I'm going to be very sad to see it. As far as other cards go, so we are back at 30. I think we'll ship it. I think this is good enough. And we'll see how this goes. So obviously I have changed quite a few cards in our card pool around. Did I ever add another mana card? 2, 3. Maybe I want another mana card. Which mana card would I want? So sort by just the mana cards. So if I was going to add another mana card, we have several options. We could have, so looking at just the rares, I don't think any of these are what we want. We're not going to have enough tools all of the time for quick thinking to trigger. Mana Blossom, well, it does give us wits. We do sometimes care about wits, but it doesn't give us any mana now. I don't think we want to be poisoning ourselves. I don't think we have enough shield or are aggressive enough to justify this one. Likewise, Blazing Ritual is in a similar place. So could just be Gambler's Focus or regular focus. We're often able to get to exactly 0, which makes focus kind of tempting. I don't think we want anything that is only going to make 2 mana for us. I think we would want something that makes at least 3. We could take a Siphon card, but I find that later in a run, I have more discard outlets than I have things to discard, and that can make Siphon card into a liability. How many skills do we have in the base deck? We've got 1, 2, 3. Considering adding Resolute Focus, but I think I've decided Gambler's Focus is just better. So the other question is, if I'm adding in another mana card, what would I cut? And I'm not sure. The Brilliant Idea, I want to try. I don't know that I'm going to like it, but that's part of why I want to try it here. I said we were going to try and fit another mana card. I think there aren't any cards here that I am confident enough that I will want to remove, that I don't want the possibility of seeing, that I'm going to leave it for now, and then we'll see how the run goes. So I think I'm going to go ahead and pause this video, split it up like I did the Rowden run, just in case there's anybody who only wants to see the deck building portion itself. So I will see you possibly in another couple of moments for the actual run. If you were just here to see the initial deck, then definitely check and see if, even if you don't plan to watch the run itself, there may be a follow-up video. So look for that to be uploaded probably shortly after, within a day or at the most of this video dropping, where I will go over any changes that I decide to make to this deck based on the results of the run that I'm about to record. So, all right, bye.